Welcome everyone to today's Contact Center Seminar. I'm Mike Aoki and I'll be your host for today's session. And it's a 1-hour seminar and we're very fortunate to go and have a couple of excellent guests here to go and talk about recruitment and engagement. And I'll introduce them in just a moment. I want to mention as well for today that if you do have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to go and use the chat window. If you look in terms of your screen, there's a little chat button there. If you click that, a chat window opens up and gives you the opportunity to go and type in questions and comments as well. And there's also a Q&A button, so you can also put your questions and comments in there as well. So either spot chat or Q&A is good for those questions. And again, I'll be your host for today's session, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, our guest experts for today. The first one is Sangeeta Bhatnagar, and Sangeeta is a North York, Toronto-based consultant who does extensive work in terms of both recruiting contact center people, she's got great information to share, as well as consulting with companies on how they can improve the recruitment processes and strategies as well. And our second guest is Jeff Doran from Contact Center Employee of Choice, or CCOC, originally known as Contact Center Employer of Choice, and he's an expert in terms of being able to look at employee engagement and doing extensive work trying to find out about how to retain your best people and some great tips going forward. Now, as well with today, we'll actually start with the very first question. And Jeff, this one's directed towards you. And a really great question here as well, which is, Jeff, what can contact centers do to position themselves as having their contact center as a destination workplace?
Yeah, that's a term I really like to use, Mike, because it kind of talks to what's going to draw employees to your organization. And, you know, as contact center operators, and I know we've got a lot of folks on the call today, that you maybe don't think a lot about what your contact center culture is or what it looks like. You might rely more on the corporate culture, and that's essentially what you talk about with regards to culture. But what we found a lot in the work that we do with our clients is the contact center can have almost like a subculture to the organization. So it's quite interesting to see what actually makes that up. But so if you really want to start off to figure out what are the kinds of people we want to attract to our organization, you really need to define your culture. So yes, in the context of the corporate culture, but what is your contact center culture and what does it look like? So the first thing you need to do really is you need to define it. What type of culture is it? Is it a culture of innovation? Is it a culture of just customer service or service in general? Is it a culture of philanthropy? You know, there are all different types of cultures, and it could be even a combination of a lot of those things, and a lot of them tend to become that. So defining your culture is very important, because what it does is then it gives you the opportunity to use the kind of language you want to describe what your culture is. And it's very important that everybody gets on board with describing the culture in the same way. So one of the things you can do is you can take a look at your current culture, but you also go back and take a look at, you know, what is your corporate mission and what does that mission statement say? What are your vision and values? And most organizations have these kinds of things laid out, but if you don't, as an organization, as a contact center, you can actually start to go through that process and develop your own. The other thing that you want to do is, what are your goals to come out of this? You might be able to define your culture, understand more what your values and your vision is, but what do you want to do with that after you've created those things? So these are great opportunities for a management team to get together and just work as a team to build these different pieces and really try to define your culture and what it looks like. In addition, one of the things that we do a lot of is talk to employees. And, you know, you can sit around as a management team and come up with all kinds of wonderful ideas and then define what your culture is and say, haha, here's our culture. And you can then put it out to the floor and get employees to see it and view it and understand it. But if they didn't have any input into that discussion, it might not hit the mark. And you could actually even get pushback on it. So you really want to make sure that you also get employees involved in this discussion. So we do different things with our clients, but there's lots of different things that you can do from this session. Hopefully you can take some of these things back and use them and practice with them in your own organizations. But focus groups are fantastic opportunities to get people sitting around the table talking about, you know, what does the culture look like? What does it mean to them? What are the pieces that they want to see to come together to form the culture? We do a lot of survey work too. If you've got a large group of employees, that might be a more efficient way to get feedback coming from your employees. and then you can condense the data and amalgamate it, and then also still do focus groups with the data. But the things that you want to ask, and these are great questions to use in a focus group session. First of all, what's working? What do you like about our culture? What is it maybe that has attracted you to our organization? And then what would attract other people? What isn't working? So what are the things that would actually push people away from our organization? And when you're talking about contact centers, there's a stigma attached to the job itself. But I would say it's not the job. I would say it's more the things around the job, that if there are things not working, it's not the job you necessarily have to change. The things that are connecting people to the organization and the contact center itself. So don't worry too much about the job being what people don't like. A lot of times it's other things. And then, of course, what do you need to change? So what do you want to focus on to move your culture in the direction that you want it to move? And the one thing I always tell people is stay positive. This is a real great thing to go through and to focus on all the positive things that you're doing and to build on those to make them even better. This is another piece that I think gets left behind in a lot of organizations. Once you start to go through the process, you really have to develop a succinct communication plan. So you've got to make sure that, yes, okay, we've defined our culture, we've gotten all the input we need, we know what we want to put out there. Now you've got to let people know. So the communication plan is critically important. So one of the things, maybe I should backtrack a little bit. You maybe want to talk about this even before you start to define your culture, because you want to make sure that once that's been done, once you have a definition and once you know what you're going to say, you want to get it out there as quickly, efficiently, and accurately as possible. So having a really good communication plan is extremely important. So you've got to define your message. And I talked a bit about language previously. You want to make sure that you're using the right kind of language that's going to express what your culture is, and that it's meaningful, and that it resonates with employees, and that they're going to remember it, because they're going to use similar language when they're talking to folks about this. Make sure you've got a good schedule. It's got to be regular and consistent. You want to make sure you're using all the proper channels. You can see by the graphic there, we've got all different kinds of channels to use to get information out to folks these days. So we want to make sure we're tapping into all of those, because employees will use different channels and tap into different channels differently. So you want to make sure you're covering off all the angles. And you want to make sure you still get feedback. You still want to say, okay, we've defined the culture, but we can still improve it. And that's the other thing about culture. Culture is fluid, and it will morph and change as time goes on. So you want to make sure you're open to getting that feedback coming back to you. So now you've got some ideas and some things that you can use in the future to make your culture even better and more effective. So these are the kinds of things that I think are very important when you're looking at more the contact center as a whole, to put the message out to folks. Now, I talked a lot about internal communications. This plan is also external communications, and I'll talk a little bit more about branding later on in this presentation and what you can do there. But at the end of the day, the language is extremely important, and how you communicate, who's communicating, the message and the language need to be very much in sync. And so that's a great place to start from kind of the 30,000-foot view perspective. And I know Sangeeta is going to get into more practical applications for things that you can use right away. But this might be a good starting point to get the management team on board and to get moving towards the kind of culture you really want to develop.
Okay, Jeff, that's really great information as well to help in terms of just making, again, that your workplace a destination workplace that people want to apply to as well. And I know, Sangeeta, here's a question for you as well in terms of how can you attract top talent? What can you do to really attract top talent to you?
Okay, so, okay, next slide, Mike. So there's a lot we can actually do in advance of any kind of job boards, any postings. So it kind of aligns, it does align with what Jeff was saying about communication. So number one thing is be involved in the community, especially millennials. They want people, companies, they want to be part of organizations that are doing things, making an impact. But get your brand out there. You can sponsor events, you can participate in charity runs, do fun events out there, but be in the community. Support where support where your organization is, and be a company of giving back. So along with that would be having a strong corporate social responsibility mission, and make that really clear. So I see lots of top organizations, and they're so amazing with their social responsibility. And so they attract people that are also aligned with that kind of thinking. So if you're attracting people with a mindset of service and giving, well, isn't that amazing in a contact center to have people actually focused on service and giving great experiences? So you're attracting the right kind of people without even one job posting. Because top talent will say, I want to work for that kind of company that does these kinds of things. Or you meet them when you're out doing external events. So the next thing is, this is a biggie, a clear, concise job description, and it should be authentic. So some companies, and it's more than not, they put all their must-haves, like a list of must-haves, and it's very, it's written in a manner that's so structured, and it doesn't sound like a lot of fun. So you want to attract people who are attracted to a high energy, fun environment. Your job description has to be written that way. So I know a couple of people that write amazing job descriptions. I recruited for one of them. It was a startup at that time, insurance company. And the person who wrote the job description was the head of the center, and it was amazing. So the kinds of people they attracted were these people that were entrepreneurial minded, people who want to solve problems, have empathy. So if you want to attract right talent, the job description requires effort. And the more transparent you are in the job description, the better talent you will attract. So if it's really vague, then people get suspicious that, am I really going to even get paid? Like, am I going to get paid what they're saying? It needs to be clear, articulate, and it needs to show that you're open to lots of diversity. In terms of diversity is not just gender and race. It's all kinds of personalities. It doesn't have to be someone fresh out of university, because that's a big error too when you say you just want new grads, then you won't have a true diverse workforce. So it really needs to be concise, very clear, and no grammatical errors, spelling or grammatical errors. Next slide, Mike. So I think Jeff will be talking about this, and he touched on it a bit. To attract great talent, you need to be where the talent is. So you can utilize like LinkedIn for sure, Facebook, Instagram, because each time you're out there, you're building your brand. And Jeff is the expert on that. He'll touch on that later. But go where the people are, go where someone is has interest in that network. And it doesn't mean just post a job there, but that's where you can share success stories. You can post where you've been giving back. You can just expand your scope so that people start to find out who you are, what your company stands for, what the culture is like. So yeah, location is everything. So if you say, oh, I'm on social media, but where on social media? What groups on social media? And what is your messaging there? And think about even utilizing your website or your blog. If you're on social media, a potential employee might go to your website. So does your website showcase your value proposition? Does it showcase who you are, what you do, how happy your employees are? And that would lead us to the next point. Sharing employee and customer success stories. This is your chance to brand yourself. So share these stories on your website, do video blogs, do interviews with your customers and your employees. The more you can showcase employees having a great time, having professional development, adding value to the company, adding value to the community, the more attractive your company will appear. And I hope it's not just appear, in reality. So this helps promote your culture. Jeff would talk about how to improve your culture, but you really want to promote that you have a culture, however you define it to be. But you want to share that into the marketplace, because there is a lot of competition. And with that competition, you have to set your differentiator. So, if we had more time, I'd go in a lot deeper. This is a really big one. And it's so common sense. Create great human experiences. Treat all candidates properly. So I hear this, and I think all of you have heard it, that, oh, recruiters, I was treated like this. No one returned my phone call. They were late for their interview. So they were not treated properly. If you don't treat people properly, they talk about you. There's lots of sites where they upset candidate can write about their experience. So just common courtesy, so that you're known for respect, you're known for being kind and compassionate, and you, in this whole big cycle of recruitment, retention, development, that at every touch point, people are treated with respect. So whether or not they start and work with you, they don't leave with a bad taste. So during the interview process, communication is so key. This is where people get so frustrated. So with my clients, I tell them all the time, someone's going for an interview. They need feedback as soon as possible, because they're not only applying to your company. When someone's in the job hunt, they're probably applying to 8, 10, 12 other top-tiered companies. So it's easy to get 100 resumes, but it's not easy to get 100 great candidates that pass through recruitment and into like the operations part of the recruitment cycle. So whoever's doing the interviews need to communicate throughout the whole process, and right from the time of resume submittal till the end. There needs to be clear communication. And now more and more companies are using, what the next bullet is artificial intelligence. So that needs to be done with a human experience in mind. So when someone, for example, this is just one example, a resume is submitted, online application is done. Well, the auto response should be written in, directed in a manner that creates a great feel. Like there should be a good feeling behind it. And you can choose how you want to use technology. And more companies are using AI for parts of the recruitment cycle, but it has to be used with the human experience in mind and human emotions, because how we make people feel will impact directly what they feel about the company. So these are just some key things. So if you understand that every candidate is an opportunity to build your brand, and is it going to make your brand seem better or worse? So I've heard companies, the candidates would tell me, oh, this company is brutal, they don't ever get back to you. Or this company is amazing, I didn't get the job, but they wished me well. So it's an opportunity. So by treating people kind and with manners and respect, we have that opportunity to do better. And we, just like for customers, we say each touch point should be a great experience. The same is for candidates in the recruitment cycle. Each point of contact should be amazing and a chance to build your brand. Next slide.
Okay, great. Thank you. And those are some really great points as far as being able to attract that top talent. And also, Jeff, I want to ask you for your opinion as well, your thoughts maybe about attracting top talent.
Well, again, Sangeeta touched on brand. I think, your brand is what precedes you in the marketplace. So it all depends on what people are hearing about your organization. It depends on who they're talking to. But, some of the best brand advocates are your existing employee base. So again, when I talk a bit about language and defining your culture, if those folks know what that is and they're out there talking about it to potential new employees, they're going to have a huge impact on the message and the branding that's going on outside your four walls. And you don't have a lot of control over that. What you can do is position yourself so that it is a positive brand message, but you really do need to make sure that that you're covering off all the bases. So like Sangeeta said, I thought was a great point about, even if you don't hire the candidate, you've made an impression on that person. They're going to go out and talk to all their friends. And who knows, one of their friends could be a good candidate that you might hire in the future. So you really want to make sure that your brand is protected, that it's being presented properly and positively. And those are some of the ways that you can do it.
Okay, great, Jeff. Those are some great points as well in terms of the whole idea about branding. You don't often think about recruitment as being part of the branding process, but it really is as far as how you present yourself to those candidates and to, the outside world as well. So great points and techniques there as well. And I want to turn things over to Sangeeta. And a question for you is looking in terms of, what are some tips for having a really successful interviewing process? How can you make that more successful?
Okay, so I'm going to pick, there's many points, but since our time is limited, I want to talk about just the current marketplace. So everyone, and I think this is challenging probably 95% of organizations, or 99, is getting that top talent. So if we have the mindset, and it's the truth, there is major competition for that top tiered talent. So even though you might be swarmed with resumes, for that top talent, it's tight. And to secure that top talent, we have to have behaviors that attract them, like which I was just speaking about, and keeping them. So first, everyone in the recruitment process, and in large companies, there's several people. Smaller companies, it might be just one or two. But there has to be that clear understanding that there's competition. And in competition, you as a company have to put your best foot forward. You have to showcase your value proposition. Why us versus that company? Not that you take the company's name, but you want to stand out. So doing all those preliminary steps are critical. But for interviewing, be respectful. Next slide, Mike. Be respectful of timeliness. So when the resume or the application comes through the portals, whatever tool you're using, from that time, you have to know that that applicant is also submitting in several other top-tiered companies. So the more timely you are in a professional manner. So I have seen and I've heard some recruiters be very colloquial and very sometimes dismissive to candidates when they're emailing or doing a phone call to start the recruitment cycle. So first you need to be on time, but that proper manners and respect to the candidate has to be there. It's not that the candidate needs you. We as organizations need those top candidates. So it's not that they're also selling themselves to us during the recruitment cycle, but really to get the top talent, we are selling ourselves in the sense of you need to work for us for these reasons. And we can't say our culture is this, but then have our recruiters have a different culture. They're the ambassadors of this is what we're like, we are like this. They show the hospitality. And I've known many people get hunted out of positions at agent level and of course senior management level because of how that initial recruiter approached them. And so being timely and professional, it says wonders about your brand and what the culture is like within your company. So first understand that there's competition and then be very timely at every stage of the recruitment cycle. Next slide. So there's a lot of this happening now, especially when there's volume recruiting. So right now I'll talk about at the agent level. Group interviews are becoming increasingly common, especially when you're doing large numbers, because if you need to fill a class of 20 or 30 or even 40, to do one-on-one interviews takes forever. By the time you are able to fill that 20th person, you might lose that first one that you thought you had because of the length of time. So, filling a class, say with 10 or 20, you could do a couple large group interviews. And what that does is it eliminates our own personal biases. So we all have them. And so you might really like someone really high energy, and you might think they're the best agent. But sometimes those calm, steady Eddie personalities are great because they're going to be the calm within the center. But that might not attract you. So by having panel style or just a group style where agents can move to different people for recruitment, and then we get together afterwards and decide who fits where and what we liked about each candidate, that eliminates some of our personal biases. As well, in the group interview, you can bring many candidates together and see how they connect with one another. You can see who's really has true empathy, who is a good listener, who is creative, who is more of a leader. So you could see those behaviors in real life versus just interview speak. Because if we acknowledge the fact that everybody knows how to give a canned interview with all the right behavioral answers. So we need to add in other dimensions more than behavior. We need to also have some practical application. So the group interviews I'm seeing it in many, many companies now, becoming a new standard almost.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sangeeta. It's really important who's looking at the recruitment process. And I know another key thing as well is looking in terms of the onboarding process. So when you actually get the recruits and they're arriving at work for, say, for instance, for call centers, their very first week in new hire training, what are some tips there, Sangeeta, as far as being able to help make the onboarding experience really great for the new hires?
So the question, this is a good question. So how important is onboarding? So I do have to get this from a paper. Okay. So there was a study. So if we can just go back to that first slide. So the Boston Consulting Group conducted a study. They found that out of 22 HR practices, onboarding is the second most influential when it comes to employee experience. These same companies have 2.5 times the revenue growth, 1.9 times the profit margins of those with poor onboarding practices. So next slide, Mike. So poor onboarding definitely is connected to increased employee turnover and decreased productivity. And if we get it that unhappy, disengaged employees, they can create such a toxic work environment. And so it's worth it to invest in a proper onboarding program. And so this is a confusion. And I hear it with even HR professionals today. When I recruit for HR, this is a question I ask them. So onboarding is not orientation. It is not. Orientation is that this is our company, this is the paperwork, some basics. Onboarding is a process, not a one-day event. And it's not just forms. It's a slow process and it takes time. So I don't want to confuse the two, because many times some people think, well, I onboarded them, I gave them all their forms and I got their void check. Well, that's not onboarding. That is pure paperwork. That's part of the onboarding process. So it's worth it to invest in a proper onboarding process that is totally, next slide, connected with the full recruitment cycle. So here's another graphic here, and it's from Bamboo HR. So think about this. There's 18 times more commitment to the organization when there is proper, strong onboarding. That's amazing, 18 times more commitment. So how we make our new hires feel is directly impacted to how they are committed to our company, our goals, and like in our industry, to our customers. So of those that were properly onboarded, there was a 91% connectedness to their work versus 29% when in poorly onboarded. So that's what we want, is the people to be connected to our workplace. We don't want people saying, oh, I'm going to leave in 120 days, 180 days. They enter and this is just a place, a little stop along the way. We want them connected. We want them passionate about our goals. And then look at the last stat here. 89% of those who received effective onboarding felt strongly integrated into the culture. And Jeff will talk about the importance of being connected to culture versus 59% being connected. So we've seen it in many centers. Think about it. You put all this time, all these dollars to do employee engagement programs and to do dinners and parties and dress down days. But if they were not onboarded properly in the first place, then you'll have a certain pool of people that will just roll their eyes up at it or be, suspicious about it or disgruntled about it. And those employees can be very toxic. So it's worth it to invest in the front end of the recruitment cycle and continue it all the way through to have the maximum benefit of your other programs. So it's critical. It's like, yeah. So like I was saying, it should be fully integrated into the recruitment selection process. So I know a company where their HR is so positive and friendly, and I know Jeff talked about be positive. That attracted some talent to leave their current employer because they felt, wow, if you're like this, what is the rest of the company like? So the front person, the recruiter, is the brand ambassador. And so it needs that onboarding process, that warm, fuzzy feel needs to be through the entire cycle. So I don't know how many people know the stage called pre-boarding. So onboarding doesn't just start on the day that you show up to work. There's so much that could be done ahead of time. So it's engaging that new hire prior to starting. So they could do a lot of paperwork, they could download things, they could have their email, they could be connected, they could be learning things. First things first, and I should have said that first, there should always be that hospitable, warm welcome, whether it be via email or in a paper, it should be warm. And that's how you'll make them feel. That's what they're going to feel about the company. During this pre-boarding time, they can be introduced to future team members. So that would increase their connectedness. So when they know they're going on the first day, there's less anxiety there. So this is pre-boarding. It's really become very big in 2019, and more companies are utilizing this instead of wasting so much time once they start. Next slide, Mike. So the first day, these are common things, and I'm surprised to this day, some companies don't have this done for their new hires. First of all, their security badges, that should always be there when they're entering the building. Someone needs to be there to greet them. They should have computer phone logins ready to go. Definitely. And I did a webinar with Jeff in 2007. I was just telling him, and we talked about this in 2007. There should be a lunch buddy for these new hires. Each person should be matched up with someone so that they know they're not eating their lunch alone. They're already nervous, and at least they get to meet someone new and who's doing well, and that spreads that positivity. I always ask, people need to know where the washroom is. Where's the washroom? Where's the washroom? So show them all the basics, where the cafeteria is, the washroom, and that lunch buddy could do that as well, because they could kind of buddy for the day almost. But those basics they need to know. And then that first day, it needs to be fun. warm, welcoming, and, you know, like not only by contact center people, it should be like the team, it should be others. And if someone looks lost, you should say, hey, are you lost? Let me help you. So that the full culture of the company comes through. Next slide, Mike. So in the beginning for contact centers, there's extensive training. So the training though should involve all levels of management. So not just the trainer, but it should also have the supervisor, team lead, the manager, the director coming in, meeting the team, meeting the class, and getting to know them. And I have seen this. You will lose top talent. And this is a point I would underline. Start on time. So if you've said you will start training at 9 o'clock and half your class is not there and it's 9:10, don't wait for the late people, the people who are not there. Start on time. Doesn't matter. Because you're putting more importance on the people who are not there than the people who are there. And top talent will not take it. If you take one thing away from all my talk, is start on time. Training, if it says 9, start at 9. If you are having a 10-minute leeway, then say, be to class at 9, official start time is 9:10. But be very clear, because people who you want in your contact center are timely, are punctual. And so they respect that behavior. Put that into training because it's part of your culture. So start on time, start on time, start on time. Very critical. I just want to say that so much. Like, if you don't start on time for training, those top performers are already irritated. Next point, set expectations clearly about what the training will look like. What kind of assessments? When are the breaks? But what are the expectations within once you leave this training? What are company expectations? And make sure you're transparent through the whole process. And I should have said this earlier during the interview and job postings, always be transparent. Especially millennials expect it, they demand it. Transparency. Next slide, Mike. So then on the onboarding, so we've walked you through the pre-boarding, first day, training, and now we're talking about the ongoing support. And so the question is, how long does onboarding go for? Well, in some companies, it could go for a year. The minimal should be 3 months to do those check-ins. You want to do employee surveys. How was it? You want to make sure there's proper team building activities. So 3 months is good, but more and more companies are going to 6 months and then even doing check-ins maybe at a year. Because people where there's those proper check-ins, they tend to use more of the services that your company offers. And they would more integrated into all aspects of your culture. So I would not just have a start and stop date that it's 3 months. I would recommend that you extend it out because the top tiered companies are doing that and they're playing a bigger role in getting the pulse of each new hire.
Great point, Sangeeta. That's really excellent in terms of being able to help do the whole onboarding process. I love your point too that onboarding is not just orientation; it's a whole process: pre-boarding, onboarding, ongoing support, etc. Now, I want to mention everybody watching at your offices as well that I know Sangeeta you shared a lot of different slides, graphics, and statistics. Just so you know, in terms of watching at your office, we will actually post a recording of this entire webinar. It'll be available probably in 2 to 3 days, and we'll send you the link for that. It'll be on YouTube, so you can actually share that with other people if you want to in your HR department or other people on your team as well, and actually show some of the graphs and some of the charts and numbers that are on there. Sangeeta, thanks for sharing that with us. Now, as well, we have another question, and Sangeeta, this is for you as well. What are some hot buttons? What are some turnoffs that can actually drive agents away or cause them to go and quit or just plain not show up sometimes? What are some key things there?
Okay, so again, you'll see some repeat because these are critical behaviors. So the candidates will either reject offers or quit early on. Again, I think I said it almost at every question. Timeliness of the interview process, timeliness of the offer letter. So all of that will impact. So they might, if they got the offer letter too late, and I've seen this too many times and it's frustrating as a recruiter, we do the whole process and then the offer letter comes 5 days after the fact. Well, by then they've already accepted an offer from another company who moved quickly on it. So timeliness of every aspect of the recruitment cycle impacts. But if the offer letter comes too late, many times it's rejected, at the agent level especially. And even if they accept it, they could quit early on if everything dragged on and then another company might have come in quicker. So they might just say yes to you and then drop out right in the training time. Next point would be hospitality from the get-go. Because you know that saying, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And people will not remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. So from reception, from recruiter to the first reception, to all the TLs, to QA, everybody that comes across this new hire has to have that kind of hospitable feel. I've seen this in several of my clients. I saw the hiring director greet new hires at the door on day one. And I was like, this is amazing. No wonder nobody leaves your organization. So hospitality, no matter what your industry, is critical. Being kind, courteous, I've said it earlier, very critical on attracting great talent and retaining them. Now, this one is a big one of mine that I always talk about, and it's the self-awareness of the leaders. So we talk about emotional intelligence when we're training agents and we expect them to have empathy. What about the emotional intelligence of the leaders or the recruiters so that they are aware maybe how they give instruction? They should be self-aware of how they ask questions. So emotional intelligence of everyone comes into play, or even think of empathy towards your new hire. I heard feedback sometimes, some candidates will say, oh, the guy was too nervous. I said, well, with me, he wasn't nervous. And then I thought about it. I'm like, I could see why they were nervous with you, because the questions were like coming out like a bullet, like, what? Tell me this, tell me that, tell me a time when you did this, tell me a time you did that. So it obviously made the candidate nervous. So the recruiter needs to have emotional intelligence and really understand that, put yourself in this person's shoes. And so that's part of that self-awareness. Think of the new hire. Why would some people quit early on? Well, maybe the trainer didn't explain things in a patient and calm manner. Maybe someone is of a not so technical, and they might need something explained a little bit more patiently. So they should have that emotional intelligence to explain things quickly, patiently, so that the people don't quit early on. Like many companies have high attrition during training. And if that's the case, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but if attrition is very high during training, you need to also review your training. And then also maybe backtrack and say, wow, what didn't we see in the recruitment cycle that we thought we could bring this person into training? So having that awareness of every person that comes in contact with the new hire is important. Now, this is a common sense one, cleanliness of the center. I had someone who said no to an offer because he said the center was disgusting. The microwave had food splatters all over it. The kitchen was dirty. And the compensation of the job was above average, but the kitchen area was really messy. So the agent said to me, I can't work here. And they turned down the offer. And all they needed to do was make sure the microwave stayed clean. And you could put in a policy and really kind of bring that into your culture of cleanliness. But they said the center was way too messy to work in. So they lost good talent because of that. Again, transparency around salary, benefits, additional perks. Many times, and I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much time here, many times it's not disclosed during the interview process, and they think will be getting something, but it's something opposite of that, or not as much as they thought it would be. I'll pick up my pace here. Amenities. Do you have any amenities? And just having a pool table or a ping pong table, but not a fun culture, won't help you. So yes, you should have the amenities, but you need to have the fun and the other culture things to go around it. Make sure in your kitchen you have more than one microwave. Going back to cleanliness, you need to have a couple microwaves. Otherwise, how do the agents finish their lunch in their short lunchtime? That's a basic amenity. Training, I talked about earlier in the onboarding process. Make sure your trainers are professional, respectful, kind, that they understand adult learners, and that they're timely and respectful of starting on time and finishing on time. And then culture. This is Jeff's area. The culture has to be a right fit. Otherwise, people reject the offer or they quit right in the first 30, 60, 90 days.
Okay, great, Sangeeta. Those are really
I have
great
to pick up the pace on those last
things to share. That's okay. That's all right. That's okay. You shared some really great points, though, in terms of looking at training and at culture as well, which is important. And speaking of culture, I want to turn things over to Jeff. And Jeff, please share with us, what are some ways that you can actually engage employees? I know you do a lot of work on employee engagement. So what are your tips in terms of being able to actually keep those great superstar employees, in terms of being with the company?
Well, one of the things that we do, like I said earlier, we do a lot of survey work. We collect a lot of data. And one of the things, and it's actually probably the top item on our surveys that comes out as things that employees want more of. And employees want more involvement in the decisions that impact them. So they want to be more involved. And so I think one of the things that organizations can really do is to look for ways to get employees involved. One client we worked with they must have had about 6 or 7 different committees. Now you can call them whatever you want, but they were opportunities for employees to join a group and then have some authority to make some decisions in an area that has an impact directly on them. And so not only do they have real buy-in and connection to the group and the contact center, but they have more buy-in to the organization as a whole. So that's a great way to get people more engaged. Just having more parties and another ping pong table, like Sangeeta said, it really doesn't do it for employees, not in the long term. It might be fun for a while, but what they really want is they want to be able to have more of an impact on their work at the organization and their success at the organization. So that's one way to do it. This slide that you just put up is another way. And it relates back to what I was talking about originally, when you're defining your culture and you're getting your language together and those kinds of things. You really need to have a plan for the long term. You need to find out, where you are today. Actually, you need to find out where you were yesterday, where you are today, and where you want to go tomorrow. So when you're working on your culture and you're working on creating that brand and putting the brand to the marketplace to attract the right fit employees, this is what you need to do. So what are the areas you're going to focus on? So in other words, what are you doing well? As I mentioned earlier, what do you need to do better? And then what can you change to make improvements? What are your goals? So set some really good timelines for your goals and objectives. So objectives are just short-term goals. So that's maybe, you can have weekly, monthly, quarterly objectives, but goals are more long-term. So you want to look at, 6 months, a year from now, what do you want your culture to look like? What is your brand going to be saying to the marketplace, and how are you best going to position that to attract the right fit candidates? And of course, strategies and tactics. This is marketing 101. Your tactics are the things that you do every day to support your strategies, and your strategies can be, directly connected to all of those things that you want to accomplish. So all the things that Sangeeta was talking about, those are all part of a strategic plan. Strategic HR plan to position yourself to, first of all, attract folks, but also retain those folks once they've gone through the various onboarding and orientation processes. But it's an ongoing thing. And this is the other thing I think I want to make clear to people is that you don't just create a plan and then it's done. This becomes kind of a way of life in your organization. It's part of your everyday operation. So you can think about branding and you can think about it in a project-oriented fashion, but you should be thinking about it as a way of just that your organization now exists. And so when you start to believe that that's what's going on in your contact center, it doesn't seem onerous. It doesn't seem like, oh, now we got to talk about branding again. No, it's just part of your everyday language, your everyday conversation, and the way you behave at the organization. So it's very important that it's an ongoing fluid function within your operations. If people are going to take on responsibilities, there'll have to be things that get done. You may have to have a group or maybe a subgroup looking at the communication plan. Well, there has to be someone that makes sure that things get done in that area. With what Sangeeta was talking about, all kinds of different accountabilities for people on for every stage along the way. So make sure that you've got that laid out effectively and people know what they're responsible for and that there are timelines that they need to accomplish things. And also, again, whenever you're developing a plan like this and you're getting people involved, always have a way to evaluate your results. And you want to make sure that you're meeting your markers, because if you're not, you need to know early on so that you can alter your course, get back on track, and get things moving the way you want them to. So again, setting up an action plan, you want to set up a team. So this is a great opportunity to get people engaged. And whenever we work with our clients, we always want to make sure we get a good representation of the frontline folks. Because I've had so many times frontline agents come up to me and say, I have never had an opportunity to get involved in the organization in this capacity. And you can just see the look in their eye, and they're just so excited, and they're learning so much that this person's engaged, they're liking what they're doing, and they're more than likely going to stick around and want to perform and be successful because they really are getting a lot out of that interaction. So a great opportunity to get all different types of folks involved. And one other thing just to add to that is that we typically will get people from other departments to be on a team, so that now you've got people interacting that might not interact on a regular basis, or maybe they've never even talked to these people before. And now you're breaking down silos, and you're getting people communicating their interests and concerns, and they're making a connection, and they're building a relationship. So it can only help build their engagement and build their connection to the organization, and it makes for some pretty fun sessions too. So the branding piece, again, I talked about getting people together. A lot of folks, branding is kind of this odd thing. A lot of people don't really understand it, what's involved in it. Public relations, there are all kinds of PR and marketing firms out there. A lot of people just don't know maybe how it impacts or how it could be utilized for their contact centers. So it's very important to kind of educate people on what the branding might be. And we talked a little bit at the beginning of this presentation, but we just kind of scraped the surface. But the branding piece, if you can get people to understand what it means and how important it is to the organization, particularly for attracting the right kind of folks, then I think they'll start to really think a bit more about how they themselves can be a brand ambassador and send positive messages to the marketplace, and they can spread the word. And anytime you can educate people on this kind of thing, they're much more valuable to the organization. So the branding piece, and organizations can do most of it themselves. They don't have to hire an outside organization to do this. They may need some guidance somewhere along the way, but there are lots of things you can do internally already, and you may already have some people with some background and expertise, and it's important to tap into that if you do. But really, you need to take a look at it from two perspectives. The external branding, so in other words, what is the message that's out in the marketplace that describes your organization? What are people saying about your organization, so forth? And there are lots of different things that you can do to impact that. Press releases are still used in a lot of cases to get the message out there. And of course, through social media, there are lots of different channels that you can send it out there very quickly and get wide distribution. So why not, someone who's on the action team, why not see if they could write a press release? And, there are all kinds of templates on the internet. When I started my business and doing what I do, I did all my own press releases. And when I finally contacted a press release organization, told them what I'd been doing and how much recognition we had been getting in the marketplace, they were blown away because we had a tremendous reach. And so it's there's lots of things that you can do yourself. You don't have to go outside necessarily to hire expensive agencies to do this, but it all depends on what kind of resources you have internally. Write articles. You know, if you are developing a great culture and maybe there's some proof to that and you've got some examples of things that you've done that are quite unique, write an article about it. Send it to Mike. Mike will love to read those articles and get them out through channels, or send them to any trade publication. They love this kind of stuff. And so it's fantastic PR for your own organization, and the people that write the articles, I mean, it makes them feel pretty good. They're writing about their own organization, maybe even things that they've done there. You'll start getting asked to conferences. We have had so many people, you know, that we know that maybe have never thought of speaking before, but they've got a really great story to tell. So now they're at industry conferences talking about their organization. Guess what? They're spreading the word. There could be a future employee sitting in the audience, so it's a great way to get the branding out. And of course, social media is you have to tap into some of the channels there. LinkedIn, of course, is a huge one, but even Facebook. Interesting though, I've got a couple of millennial children in my household, and they don't go on Facebook anymore. So you've got to really pick your social media channels to make sure that you're targeting the right folks, as Sangeeta was mentioning earlier. So that's external branding. Internal branding, though, it's almost as important, maybe in some cases more important, to make sure that that same message is sifting through your own organization internally. Now, the thing is that it has to be valid, and it has to be real. And I think Sangeeta was talking about being transparent. If people don't believe that you are a great place to work, and that's the kind of branding that you're putting out there, then it's going to fall flat. You really need to be careful. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing is measuring. You want to make sure that you're getting feedback from employees, and you want to make sure that the things that you're putting in place are driving towards that ultimate goal, and that people are seeing the examples of that. So, but internal branding can be fairly simple too. Once you know that you've built that, people believe it, they're drinking the Kool-Aid. Signage and visibility is extremely important. We do a lot with some clients when they go through a program. If they get recognition, they may want to do something for all the employees and get a gift that recognizes the fact that they are a great place to work. If you have a newsletter, even like a hard copy or something online, it's a great idea to actually have a section in that newsletter that talks about all the great things you're doing. And it's not, you know, it's being humble, but it's also saying, you know, we are a pretty darn good place to work. And one of the pitfalls I think I see in a lot of cases when management teams are talking about, you know, their organizations, they tend to focus on the negative because they're looking for ways to fix things. They want to make things better, and that's a great way to be, but then you tend to drift towards what's not working. You should also take a look at what is working. And in many cases, you're doing more of what is working than what isn't working. And so when you start to focus on what is working, you start doing more of those things, you'll start to see they really supersede a lot of the things that maybe aren't working, that you don't really need to focus as much energy on. Web portals, special events, town halls, all great opportunities to get the word out, to let people know internally why you're a great place to work.
Okay, great, Jeff. Thank you very much for that and sharing those ideas as well. And that's really important in terms of being able to really retain those really great employees going forward. And I also want to mention as well that we do have a cute question and answer session right now, but I also want to be respectful of people's time. It's actually 2 p.m. Eastern time right now, which is the formal end of the session. We have got through the content that's in the session as well. But I want to mention, though, that our speakers graciously are willing to go and spend an extra 10 minutes. So you can actually go through some of the questions that you've typed into the question and answer and also the chat windows as well. So that's the end of the formal program itself. If you are able to go and stick in for another 10 minutes, we can actually go through some of the Q&A as well. If you have to, you know, end right now at 2 p.m., that's fine as well. Just as a reminder for you as well, that we will have a copy of the webinar and actually recording of the full webinar, including the Q&A, available for you. So if you do have to log off right now, that's fine. You can actually see it on YouTube when we send the link out in 2 or 3 more days and actually find out about the Q&A session itself. For those of you that are able to go and spend an extra 10 minutes going forward, we'll actually go through the Q&A right now live, and I'll actually start with a question for Sangeeta. And so, Sangeeta, a question for you is, and we'll just read this off word for word, and this question comes from Derek. And the question is, what is the best way, aside from an aptitude test, to determine whether a candidate has the ability of handling complex customer service calls and an ability to retain a large amount of information after training is complete. So Sangeeta, what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, the standard industry standard is aptitude tests, but I like to remind people that some people do not test well. So I've had some people who can really work well with technology and they can handle the complex in a testing environment, but in reality, they could not. So sometimes you could just do it depending on the person with a case scenario. So I gave someone, I didn't make them use real-time technology. I wrote out a case and I had them read it and then tell me their solutions back verbally. Because I could sense that I saw their other test scores. They did not do well. So I had a feeling, but I liked them. My gut was like, I like this guy. I want him to pass. So then I wrote out a case and I did it verbally with the candidate, and they did excellent. They did excellent. They just did not test well. So I know most industry, we use different software packages, testing tools, but it's not always the only indicator. So I would also go to just a real scenario and tell me what you would do and see how they retain information and how they write down their notes. And they can do it right in front of you or on email or a Skype call. And those work out fantastic.
Okay, great, Sangeeta. Great advice there. And Jeff, a question for you, and this one's from Tonica. How do we appeal to millennials? And you mentioned your millennial daughters, your millennial children. How do you appeal to millennials in terms of being a contact center?
Yeah, well, I think Sangeeta touched a bit on that. Being authentic is huge. They do not like putting up with any BS, pardon my French. But yeah, I think, again, you've got to go where they hang out. And, you know, I know with my kids, they're, you know, early 20s, and they're in different chat rooms or in different social media sites. And it's interesting how they communicate. My daughter is really into memes. So if you're trying to recruit my daughter, you'd send her a meme. Now I'm pushing the boundaries a little bit there, but they do communicate differently. But I think at the end of the day too, millennials are looking for a lot of similar things that even Gen Xers were looking for. And they want more balance in their lives. They want more experiences, and they want them quicker. So, you know, the setting realistic expectations, I think, is very, very important for everyone that you're looking to recruit, but also making sure that you are hitting the hot buttons to first of all, get them to say, hey, this might be the place I'd like to go to, because look, they got lots of great training. I'm really into learning about this organization. They've got great development opportunities, maybe even travel within the organization, different facilities, even different countries. And that's the other thing I find about millennials. They're not as locked down. They're much more mobile than previous generations. So it's something to keep in mind. And I know it might be difficult in the contact center, but I think just making sure that they understand realistic opportunities that are available to them will help you attract those kind of folks.
Okay, great advice, Jeff. I appreciate that. And a question for you, Sangeeta, and this is from Joanne. And Joanne, thanks for asking this question. For unsuccessful candidates, is it good to give them constructive feedback as to why they didn't get the job? What do you think, Sangeeta?
In a perfect world, yes, but it's a slippery slope. I wouldn't even go there. A, you don't have the time, but B, I think there's depending on what you say and how you say it, there's a lot of repercussions that could happen. So I don't recommend at all that you give the feedback. There's too much risk associated. Can I add one point to Jeff's questions around the millennials?
Oh, of course, Sangeeta, go ahead.
That to attract millennials, they need to see value in the work that they will be doing. So we need to position in that job description and in the interview how important their role is. Because in a contact center, they're the heartbeat of the company. So we just need to always show the value of that role, regardless of what the role is, the importance in the overall picture.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sangeeta. And I think, you know, we see that right across the board. Such a huge opportunity to for everyone within the organization at all levels to understand how their role impacts the corporation as a whole.
Okay, great point as well, Jeff. And Sangeeta, a question for you as well, in terms of looking at this. Another one, and this is also from Bhatnagar. What nonverbal clues should we look for in order to distinguish a dishonest candidate in an interview?
Oh, okay. This one I love. Okay. So if someone is right-handed and they look up to the right when you're asking a question, so I say, oh, have you ever had any conflict with a coworker? And they go, no, never. So then you know they looked up and that, like, they're in line mode. Just think of a little kid. Did you take that ice cream? And if they took the ice cream, they look up and they'll look in whatever direction to not have eye contact. So nonverbal cues, you look, see where their eyes are going. If they cannot make eye contact with you, unless they're very, very introverted or very, very nervous, typically it's a lie. If you ask a question and they start, so for example, this is their resume here, and they start turning in their resume and fidgeting with it and making it into different shapes, when you ask a particular question, that's a great cue that there's some lying happening, you know. But when you look in the direction of where their eyes go. So if it's right-handed and they look up right, that's typically creating a story. And if they're left-handed and they look up left, that same thing, typically creating a new story, a new reality in their mind, but they're buying time. That's
okay, great.
Right away, yeah.
Okay, that's a great point. I like that, Sangeeta. Thank you very much as well. And I want to thank everyone who's asked questions today. We really do appreciate that. And it gives, of course, Jeff and Sangeeta a chance to really address those kinds of issues. So thank you very much for asking those questions and for hanging in for the extra few moments as well on the session today. Just to quickly wrap up as well, I want to thank also our sponsors, 8x8, Intelligence, and GTAC for being able to go and help sponsor and organize today's session. And especially thanks to Jeff and Sangeeta as well for sharing their expertise with us and the great information that they had with us as well. And for those of you that are on this webinar, we will send out a copy of the webinar recording, a link to the YouTube recording of this webinar, so you have a chance to actually review that and take a look at it again, or share it with people as well that you think may benefit from that. One last thing I'll mention as well is about GTAC, and GTAC again is the Greater Toronto Area, Toronto, Canada Area Contact Center Association, and they'll be having their big annual conference. 400 people, a lot of very senior level people. It's a full day event in November. And actually, just want to mention as well that tickets are still available. There's early bird pricing available until July 15th for this event. And you can go to the link that's listed on the screen there to be able to go and register to reserve your ticket for it. And again, it's not just for people in Canada, it's also for people from the US as well that may be up in Canada to go and visit this kind of a conference as well. And if you want to hear about other GTAC events, you can also click on the link at the bottom page, or actually type that in, gtacc.ca as well for that. I also want to thank as well Galina and Yana, who are behind the scenes with Intelligence, actually helping to organize today's session and also fielding some of the questions as well going forward. So thanks to everybody involved in today's session and for all of you watching at your offices as well. And I hope you enjoyed today's session and look forward to having future sessions with you. So thanks and take care.